want to talk? So let's talk. Here. Talk. You want to talk? You gotta talk, you need to talk. News talk.
I talk, you talk to Solomon. I talk, you talk to Solomon. Yeah, let's talk to Solomon. Talk to Solomon.
You gotta talk, you want to
Welcome back to an exciting discussion here we had in the last half hour. We're going to continue this half hour. Our guest is Dr. Alan Keyes, along with Dave Weinbaum, Chief Steve Davis, and me. And on his blog, Loyal to Liberty, LOYALTOLIBERTY.com, Dr. Keyes has put together, and I have not read it, although I will, I promise you, before the next show, a process, which is the process that says if we were to have, and Alan, let me see if I can go through this and tell me if I'm wrong. If we were to have a stand-in for each state, and it could be a different person in all 50 states,
Right.
that stand-in would be committed to not running for president, but running on the principles that a president would need to follow, saying that if I, Tom, Joe, Susie, Bobby, win this particular state, the electors that I will select will pick someone that will meet these requirements and will commit to these principles. That if enough of those were successful to garner 270 votes, then that committee of electors would then do the research and pick the candidate. Is that right?
That's right. Well, with one slight amendment, the electors would be chosen by a grassroots process. Imagine, just take one state, any state. Could be Indiana, could be Missouri. You have Tea Party gatherings all over that state. You familiarize people with this idea, hopefully, through the writing, the spreading of the thought and the thinking. People have worked it out in their minds, how they go about it. And they all gather together with what purpose in mind? Not just to hear speeches and stuff and rouse themselves on the way they have been doing, which has been good, but which has not, I think, produced the kind of result we really need to see. But in this case, they'd be focused on, okay, who right here amongst us would we trust to go to a meeting of people from all over the state? And at this meeting, those people would, from amongst themselves, since they've all been chosen by grassroots gatherings like this, choose a slate of electors equal to the number that's required, and designate a couple of folks of good reputation that they would vet to then be the stand-ins on the ballot. So the choice wouldn't be made by any individuals. It would be made as the founders thought it should be made, by a process that represents the grassroots selections of the people from amongst themselves, people that they know and trust, to then go and take actions that they themselves would take. Not actions that are dictated by the media and party bosses and money powers, because this is the direct selection of the people for representatives who will act as they do, who will take the lead from the people who choose them. They would meet at the state level, they would put the slate together. Then another process would have to be gone through, Stan, during the time when the window was open to have names, individual names, submitted for the ballot. In almost every state, that process is open to the people. You have to get a certain number of signatures on a petition. You have to get a certain amount of money that's paid for a fee. It varies from state to state. A few of the states try to make the barrier so high that nobody could ever challenge these parties, but most of them don't. And I actually think that since the Tea Party and grassroots people now, whether they wear that label or not, are so practiced at this over the course of the last 5 or 6 years, it's almost like they've been rehearsing and preparing and exercising for this very purpose. They know how to gather people together. And therefore, I don't think that from a real grassroots movement like this, the petition process would be all that challenging. And so you would then have to carry that out. And the final stage of the process would be to use the same grassroots mobilization in order to spread the word that a slate was available. And I also talk about how to identify those slates, not only in one state, but throughout the country. And I just invite people to go read. More thinking certainly needs to be done, but I think I've laid out a structure that deserves to be thought through and that would use the grassroots energy and the mechanisms that people throughout the country have already developed. And they'd use it with a view to doing what the founders thought should be done in this process, where the people doing what they do best, which is to choose representatives from amongst themselves, they would then put together an electoral college majority that would represent what they want, not what is now being dictated by an elite party system, Stan, where everybody's beginning to realize these two parties are being governed by the same factional interest. They are moving the country step by step in the same direction, no matter who occupies the White House. We've been heading to the left. We've been heading to bigger government and to more spending. We've been heading down the road to gay marriage and all of this. Nobody familiar with the Republican Party actually fails to see that throughout the country we have a leadership that has been tacitly and quietly promoting this whole gay agenda. Everybody sees it. It almost destroyed the American Conservative Union, and that was just one of the instances in which that underlying tendency broke to the surface and appalled the people. So I think this is a process where we need to study it. And it's not because I think we have to give up the whole party thing totally and forever. No, I think we need a reminder, though, that the people are still capable of acting independently of these would-be tyrants. And once that is demonstrated, I think it's going to have a very healthy effect on the whole system.
All right, David, you had a question.
Yeah, a couple of questions. I can't challenge a doctor on the facts of the situation because I haven't read the material, so I will read the material. But my question is, when did we stop doing this the way the founding fathers wanted us to do it, number one? And number two, practically, and now you mentioned the Tea Party, but practically, how's this going to get done during this election?
Well, step number one, I note in my article, I talk about George Washington's farewell address, his warning against the spirit of party. And when you read the description in his farewell address, and I quote part of it, it really is stunning how similar it is to the actual situation in which we find ourselves. These folks had an amazing kind of, I think, providential insight into what would be the consequences of going the wrong way on this. But I point out in the piece that almost right away, we started going down the wrong road. And so the parties as a system started to develop. I think it was in after the third election. It was you had Washington, you had Adams, then the Jefferson-Burr problem led them to change the way that they elected the president and vice president to avoid the problems they had had. And in the context of all of this over those years, this party system idea started to develop. And I think that the interesting thing was we had a strong ethos in terms of religion, in terms of the commitment to the founding and so forth. And I think it restrained us in various ways from reaping the fruit of this mistake during the early years of the Republic and even during the first part of the 20th century. But as the assault on our culture of liberty, the culture that respects God, the culture that read and understood the Declaration, the culture that rejects the idea that somehow rights are just mindless, licentious freedoms and understood the idea that they have to do with doing what is right. As that became weaker, then this party system became more demagogic, as George Washington would say, more factional, more a grouping of people who were associated in their own selfish interest. And you know what's interesting? If you read the academics writing in the 50s, 60s, and all of this, they started to enshrine that as if that's normal. To talk about this politics of selfish interest, this disregard for the common good, this stitching together of selfish desires, as if this was the way it was supposed to be. That's just a lie. And I think the time has come when we can reform this mistake. And you know why? Because the technology has caught up with the visionaries of our founding. They envisaged a process that would involve the grassroots over a mighty nation. But we have actually developed the technologies that allow you to do it. That would allow us, for instance, to elect an electoral college majority, and for 6 weeks, without having to leave their home state, they would still be able to conference and communicate and vet with one another until they decided upon who was the right choice. Do you realize that? Our technology has caught up with the visionary ideas of America's founding fathers. Now it's time that we put it together. and catch up with them ourselves.
All right.
So, doctor, what you're saying is this is already a 250-year habit. We're going to try to break. They didn't do it right since the beginning. So we got to break this habit. When? Now? What's going to happen? You answered the first question, but how about how are we going to change it right now for this election?
Well, the only way that it's going to be changed right now for this election is if people who have been engaged out of frustration and anger, and still feel it, by the way, everywhere I go in the country, I am finding that the level of frustration is higher. People are deeply angry at what has happened to our country. They are angry with Obama and angry with the socialists and angry with the Democrats, but they are also angry with the Republicans who tolerated, aided, abetted, and continue to promote the very same ideas. People haven't been stupid. They've been watching. They've been watching as the folks who were elected to give the Republicans back the majority in Congress in 2010 had their arms twisted up behind their heads in order to get them to support the very measures that Stan was talking about a while back in terms of the NDAA and arresting people without due process and all. That was passed by a bipartisan majority. And Mitt Romney says he will keep it in place. You do understand that, right?
Was that in the Senate or the House?
Both.
It passed through the whole Congress. It is now law.
Really?
Okay? This is a problem. And so the difficulty is that whether you're looking at things like gays in the military, Romney has said he's going to keep the same kind of abandonment of common sense and reason that Obama has forced on our military people. Make sense to somebody? Makes sense to me, because I know that the godless elite faction that is in fact the primary influence over both parties is committed to the destruction of the traditional family and the promotion of gay marriage and things of this kind. They want it because it destroys the ideas and moral character that is the greatest obstacle to the elite tyranny they now wish to restore, right? The way of governing things that was commonplace before America was founded, where elites got to decide and they were the be-all and end-all. You didn't do things to lift the people up in terms of their prosperity because the riches and the power belonged to the outstanding few, and they gobbled them all up and defied anybody to do anything about it. That was the way the world was governed before America came along. And I think what kept us from reaping the consequences Washington foresaw was the fact that there was a strong character, that there were people who were steeped in and practiced that faith which corresponded to the moral requirements of the Constitution, and that Adams referred to when he said it was framed for a moral and a religious people. You and I both know that over the course of the last several decades, these same elites have been working systematically to break that down. They haven't succeeded to a remarkable degree with large numbers of people around the country, but they have made them feel beleaguered and put upon and isolated and helpless. And I think that what we've been seeing over the last several years is people breaking free of that brainwashing. And all I'm suggesting is that people go take a look and think through the fact that right in front of us right now, there's an opportunity to demonstrate that the people are not helpless, that they can once again relearn what the Constitution actually says, and using 21st century technology, they can put it into practice, just as they have been doing, in a way that will take the world's breath away, but that will also, I think, restore the good and decent heart of the American people. We don't have to let this elitist takeover destroy our country. The people.
Your prediction, Dr. Tues, are we going to have an election November 6th between Mitt Romney and Barack Obama?
Well, see, I'm hoping that folks will take the bit in their teeth, as they have done already, by the way, because this movement we've been seeing around the country at the grassroots wasn't invented and fabricated by these elites. It came right up out of the heart of the people. It has been hijacked to a degree by some of these folks now, but it hasn't worked. A lot of the people who were responsible for the original movement backed away when the Republican hacks started to impose their godless agenda on the Tea Party. And they're sitting there now looking at it and going, how did this happen? This isn't why we got involved. They didn't get involved over money issues. They got involved over the same issues that our founders got involved in the revolution over. It wasn't about the taxes and their amount. It was about the process by which those taxes had been imposed that destroyed and trampled on the liberty and responsibility of the people. And that was the heart of the Tea Party movement as it began and as it still exists. Those people are what I'm relying on. Will they do it? I can't predict that because it's not up to any one individual. It's not up to me. If this country is going to be saved now, it will be saved the way it's supposed to be governed. It will be saved by a movement of, by, and for the people themselves. And if they don't rediscover that ability to take the initiative, then the country will not be saved because it will no longer have a people that corresponds to its requirements.
All right, we're going to take a break from this topic, although we are going to get back in this next week because I'm going to read the materials. Everyone else will read the materials. I don't know if Dave is available. He's a very busy guy. But we're going to try and address this next week. We'll have a week at least to get informed and get some other people and maybe invite some other folks to talk about it. Now, I'd like to talk about an incident not nearly as impactful, but I think impactful. A woman, a Michigan woman, involved in an out-of-wedlock relationship, was pregnant, ready to deliver. In fact, she delivered yesterday, a baby, but while 9 months pregnant, got together with the guy who fathered the child but said he didn't want the child, but accepted an invitation from him to get back together. After that movie they went to, the roommate kidnapped this woman, took her to a vacant lot, set her on fire, shot her, assumed he had killed her, and told her this was because she wouldn't have an abortion, and left. By the grace of God and the fact that she was, frankly, a very big woman, the fat absorbed the bullet. It didn't hit anything vital and didn't hit the child. She was able to, even though hurt, burned, bleeding, got to her home. Her mother took her to the hospital. The police went and got the two individuals, arrested them. She gave birth today, and we have a child, a hurt woman, but a living woman, thank God, and two lowlifes that are now in jail and are going to be charged with anything, everything, and all things, and will probably never see the light of day again. All of that is the facts, but here's the issue, and you just talked about it, Alan. The idea that you should get married before you have children. The idea that there should be a joy in this life. The idea that there is right and wrong, moral and immoral, more important than legal and illegal, is moral and immoral. All of that, to me, is shown in the story as being AWOL, absent without leave, totally not even in the picture. I'm going to start with you, Chief.
Well, several issues, but I'll be real quick. The first one is I want to commend this woman for choosing life for this baby. That's the first thing, because any mother that chooses life in this day and age deserves all of our gratitude and love. The second thing is you're right, Stan. She made a very poor choice with the father of this child. From the moment of conception, she's denied this baby the access to a family situation and a father in the home. The last part, being a law enforcement officer, I want to say that the conspirators and the perpetrators of this act need to go to hell, and the sooner we can send them there, the better.
Go ahead, David.
Well, it's a tragedy, and Davis is right. Sheriff Davis is right. I mean, this woman stood up for life and deserves all the credit in the world. It's too bad that the culture where she's from, this abortion frenzy is going on too much, and it's going on too much in the black community, where they have 36% of the abortions and only 12% of the population. And it's incredible to think that these guys could get away with it, and how many others out there do get away with it. So it's also a cultural matter in that where are the parents of these people that are having sex and having babies? Where's the guidance to the woman? Where's the help the woman needs, the support to get out of situations like that, to have her baby in peace and quiet? Those are the questions I would ask. And sure, these guys ought to burn. There's no doubt about it.
Dr. Keyes.
Well, first, let me just say that every now and again, Chief, there will just be a moment on this program, and you will just speak from your heart and from your common sense. And I'm just sitting here going, oh, I love this man, because you see things in a way that I think touches the real heart of what ought to be our human concern. And that's what you just did. And I just want to say how grateful I am, and what a joy it is to spend time with you when we're able to get together like this every week. But I think also, Stan, that what you commented on is also touching at the heart of the matter. We talk, for instance, about the whole dispute that's taking place over gay marriage, quote unquote. It's really, of course, about marriage and about the meaning of that institution and about whether it's going to survive. And what's being done is that they're trying to redefine it in a way that has nothing to do with procreation. But when you do that, you are abandoning the understanding that then gets people to think about the right thing to do with respect to parenting and procreation. See, that's where the rights of family come from. God made us in such a way that we procreate. And that in order to perpetuate the species, man and woman must get together and produce the child. That is a right thing to do, because the first commandment was be fruitful and multiply. It is good for the common good. It's good for the whole of humanity. So if folks do it in the right way, then it's going to produce a good result for the community in the narrow sense, but also for the community in the largest human sense. Very good. So throughout human history, people understanding that that was a good thing sought to make sure that folks would take it seriously, act responsibly toward it. And the institution of marriage, I think, was the community's recognition of the kind of will, goodwill, and decent will that was required, the kind of training and education that was required, and the kind of backing that had to be given to the moral understanding that got people to do right in terms of carrying out that command to be fruitful and multiply. And that's how the institution of marriage came about. Remove procreation from the understanding of marriage, and you are absolutely destroying that whole moral infrastructure. And I think that's what you're talking about. You come to a world in which then people look at the relationship that involves the sexual function, and it's all about pleasure, it's all about selfish gratification. The baby is an inconvenience, a problem, or as Barack Obama put it, a punishment, and all of this. And the end result is what? A deep and callous disregard for right, in the sense of disregarding the responsibilities and obligations of the institution that is supposed to handle procreation in a way that's good for the community and good for the species as a whole. And I think that as we've walked away from our respect for that moral understanding of marriage, not just as a legal fact, but the underlying moral reality that it represents a commitment to God's good will for our human species. Final point. I think that the role that's played here by violence and death is not an accident. Because at the end of the day, when you turn your back on that benevolent will of God for the procreation of humanity, you're kind of embracing what I think is the underlying philosophy of a lot of people now who embrace the sort of eco-tyranny approach and so forth. They look at human beings as if we're a blight on the planet. I read that St. Vincent de Paul University had invited some guy there to speak to their commencement who actually believes that the world would be better off if there were no humans on it. And that attitude is penetrating. I read another piece that said they had done a survey amongst young kids, and the young kids took the view who had been all indoctrinated in this eco-tyranny stuff, and they took the view that the world would be better off if there were no humans on it. You do realize then that that's a rejection of God's benevolent will toward humankind. He wants us to be here. He created us to be here. The fundamental premise of justice in the Declaration of Independence is that we should accept that benevolent intention of God for our humanity and acquit ourselves toward him in a way that respects that gift of life. That's what it's about. And the issue that I think is really on the table in abortion, in gay marriage, and all of this is whether we're going to turn our back on that understanding and embrace what is essentially the advocacy of suicide for the human race that a lot of these people represent. And that heart of deep anti-human violence breaks out in episodes like the one you describe, even as it breaks out in the larger episodes that are threatening the extinction of our respect for the real dignity of human life.
With that, we will call it a night. I want to thank Dave Weinbaum for joining us. Thank you, David.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you, Dr. Keys. And of course, we have our week planned next week. We already have that planned. We're going to discuss your plan. And Chief Steve, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
And thank you, America, for spending time with us. We very much appreciate it. Keep watching, and we'll be back next week with more of Talk to Solomon.